Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. We have a great episode planned for you today. Today, we're sitting down with Stephan Kesting of grapplearts.com. If you don't know who Stephan Kesting is, he is the originator of grapplearts.com, which is kind of like the first format of online-based training that kind of ever got developed, especially in the art of jiu-jitsu, especially here in Canada. Before we get started, we want to thank you for subscribing to our YouTube channel. If you want to keep seeing the best content as far as coaches, athletes, and different types of guests, make sure you subscribe. That way you don't miss a thing. Today's episode is brought to you by Spirit Leaf Waterdown, located at 64 Hamilton Street North in Waterdown, Ontario. If you're looking for Canada's top cannabis brand, make sure you go to Spirit Leaf Waterdown, and they're going to be able to help you out with all your THC and CBD products. Just make sure you follow them on Instagram and follow us on Instagram, and you're going to save money every time you shop there. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll see you soon on the mat.
All right, where I go.
Well, welcome everybody to this special podcast episode. I'm Michael. We got Erik. We have Aaron, of course, here as well, and our esteemed guest for today, FireFighter, jiu-jitsu legend, grapplearts.com, and just fighting the good fight. Stephan Kesting, how are you doing today?
Very well. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
So I want to start out hot. We're coming out hot.
Oh boy.
The last 2 years, there's been a lot of things going on, unless you've been, living under a rock.
I'd like to have been living under a rock. Can we please allow me to live under a rock for the last 2 years?
Things would have been much simpler, but I've been following you on social media for a while. You've got, followed your, jiu-jitsu and all that, and a lot of things that you've been doing there. But talking about, there's a lot of controversy that's been happening the last couple of years, but, you've gotten involved, talking about vaccines and, their usefulness and why they're important. And I want to start out hot. We're coming in hard. How did you get involved in these discussions? I've seen you've been doing talks in universities and all that. So you're a firefighter, yeah, and then, jiu-jitsu black belt. How did you get involved in all this?
I'll start by saying that a jiu-jitsu black belt really just gives you knowledge in one area, and that's how to choke people better, how to break their arms better, maybe break their legs better. And that's really the only area of expertise that a jiu-jitsu black belt gives you. Similarly, if I'm a Muay Thai instructor, yeah, I could probably show you how to open up someone's forehead with an elbow, knock them out with a round kick to the spleen or whatever. So I don't think that the jiu-jitsu background gives me any authority at all to talk about this. But before I started training jiu-jitsu, depending how you count it, I'd done some judo, I'd been doing lots of other martial arts. I was a biologist. I got my undergrad at McGill University in biology there, and then I got my master's degree at University of British Columbia. So before I was a martial artist, I was a science nerd, and then I went and got a reasonably solid science background, and spent 15 years in the field of biology doing research. Now, does that give me any kind of special authority here? Not really, but it gives me a certain amount of background, and it gives me the ability to read the scientific papers. So as opposed to, you're just doing whatever the media is telling you to do. Well, I actually get very little of my information. I'll get 0% of my information from CNN or MSNBC. And if there's something really interesting on, the New York Times, say, that's a starting point. Okay, what is the study that they are citing? Let's go and look at that. Similarly, if I go to Fox News and they cite something, okay, what is the study that they are citing? And let's go look at that. And it's really hard to read that stuff. You really need, it takes a ton of training just to write a scientific paper using the special arcane language and structure. And you need a fairly decent background in statistics and experimental design. And that's just not something that a lot of people have. And by some cruelty of fate, by some drawing of the short straw, I had the background in jiu-jitsu and the background in biology and a background in emergency response. So I found myself at this nexus of these three overlapping areas with a social media platform. And I was like, this is probably going to be a bad idea, but I should speak out at least about the facts, or the facts as we understand them currently, because a lot of people don't understand that there's facts and there's policies. right? Like a fact is something like, I don't know, currently we think that the infection fatality rate of this disease is 1% or whatever. A policy is, what do you do about that? Do we go to a lockdown, which we never really had in North America? We had kind of pseudo lockdowns, but if you take a look at the lockdowns they had over in Europe, those were actual lockdowns. We have had like brownouts and slowdowns, and we'll target this business, but we'll leave this other one open depending who had more lobbying power or whatever other decision-making criteria were used. Those are policies. Mostly, I've been talking about the facts, right? Like the fact that most recently, that there is actually no good data suggesting that ivermectin works, right? Like this miracle cure that's being touted by the anti-vaxxers as essentially an alternative to vaccination.
We may have to beep the I word, because I may have jokingly said it in like a previous podcast. I think we got blocked, demonetized, like everything.
Really?
So yeah, It was. I mentioned it like just 10 seconds in on a podcast. This is like a goof, like, and not like promoting it or anything, but I just mentioned it, and like Aaron was like, "Hey, I'm gonna run this ad on this podcast," and then like couldn't do it. It was a mystery.
Wow. Okay.
So, it would not let me run an ad. I think we're far enough in the podcast anyways. They're not going to go this far, so I'm not worried about it. But yeah, it was so weird. Like I tried, I'm like, okay, maybe it's my bio, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And for the life of me, I could not get them to run this ad.
You should
and I was
not have included your link to OnlyFans in the description.
Aaron, this is the 19th time I've told you this.
That's what it was. That's what it was.
Well, like we've been in Ontario, and we've been actually kind of targeted, I guess, by a lot of these, what you said, like brownouts or shutdowns, because unfortunately for me and Aaron, they've targeted a lot of like the fitness industry and the martial arts industry. So we've been this close to OnlyFans, this close.
Well, I'll say two things. Like I'm not, in the first year, I thought that the precautions taken were fairly reasonable, given that we didn't really know what we were dealing with. In British Columbia, where I live, gyms are closed in theory. Very few gyms are actually closed in practice, but gyms are closed in theory. And and they're still allowing concerts, they're still allowing hockey games, which is insane. Like if we're gonna do this, and there's, I think, pretty good arguments for doing it to allow, because we're so far behind in our booster roll. Now I'm just bitching about BC politics, but whatever, you asked for it. Let's say there's a good argument for slowing everything down just so we can roll out our boosters to anyone who wants them, especially teachers. We're going to have to go into the classrooms and, okay, we've screwed up. We're 3 or 4 weeks behind other provinces, or a couple of months behind other provinces in a booster shot rollout. We need to slow things down. Okay, cool. How about everybody suffer? Right now, it's like the London Blitz, where they're saying, okay, this store can stay open and keep its lights on. This store can keep its lights on, but this category, I don't know, fish and chips shops, they need to close. They need to shut their lights off at night and be blackened out. That doesn't make any sense. So great, you're going to shut down gyms for a really good reason. Okay, cool. Let's hope that there's some kind of financial support for those gyms. And I think it was like $1,000 for 3 weeks if you had 5 employees or less. So basically spending, like coffee change. But then let's spread the pain across the board. Let's not, just target the smaller gyms. So my point here is I don't agree reflexively with everything that the government is doing. I think there's some really shitty policy, but again, that's policy. What are the facts? Okay, let's look at, I don't know, the doubling time of Omicron versus Delta. Let's take a look at the hospitalization rate. Let's take a look at the staff that we have in the hospital. Those are facts, more or less. What do we do about that? That's policy. So I disagree with the policy, but I think if you have people making up facts or spreading misinformation or disinformation, the odds of coming up with a good policy are almost zero. I mean, look at this in a jiu-jitsu context, right? Imagine you might like arm bars, I might like chokes, and we might argue back and forth, but there's no denying that both work. But now we've got somebody coming in with a fact that, the secret ultimate way to defeat somebody in a jiu-jitsu match is by hitting a certain pressure point floating ribs on the left side of the body or the right side of the body at the same time as you're hitting a pressure point in the wrist, and that's guaranteed going to knock the person out. That's just a shitty fact. You might be able to coach your students to win a tournament by focusing on, what would I say, arm locks. I might be able to, I should give you chokes since it's a choking hazard
chokes
podcast.
and then you get arm bars. Yeah.
All right. So you might be able to coach your students to win a tournament based focusing on chokes, and I might be able to come up with an alternate policy or an alternate strategy of coaching my students to win with arm locks, but nobody's going to coach a student to win using a pressure point to the ribs at the same time as hitting a pressure point on the wrist. That's just fantasy land. There, I kind of dragged it back to jiu-jitsu. I'm proud of myself.
No, but 100%. But I mean, like, it's frustrating to see. Like, I had to like kind of just like get off of social media at some point because it's frustrating to see. I understand business owners and all these other people that are frustrated with the policy, as you said. But again, like, facts are fact. But it's also like you're at this. Yeah, you want clubs to be open. You want to be able to spread community, have businesses keep their lights on, pay the bills, all these different things. But then there's other individuals out there just saying stuff that doesn't make any sense, but then people believe it because like, oh, hey, that's my instructor. I believe that works. Right. So it's such a fine line, and it's frustrating as like an educated individual seeing it. And you're like, what the fuck are people doing?
I think it's also that, like, as you're saying, like, there's two things, like there's government policy, and then there's like the biology, the science of like, this is fact. Where I think a lot of people are frustrated at the government. I think everybody's frustrated at certain levels of government to a certain extent. Like, I know you are, I am, I'm pretty sure Aaron is been at times where I think there's nothing wrong with being, critical and frustrated at that. But then I think people then take it to the next level and they're going after, it's like, well, like, the government's like doing this, and then like, okay, well then why aren't they using the letter I to treat it? And then this and that. And, oh, I saw this on YouTube. And it's kind of like jiu-jitsu. It's like, I saw this. It's like the guy, it's like, I saw this on YouTube. I'm going to bring it to class.
But the difference there is that let's say that I have a theory that an Aikido wrist lock, Kotegaeshi, right? The outward twisting wrist lock is the ultimate submission in jiu-jitsu, right? Let's say I can go and test that, and I can get feedback for myself. If we have got some crazy, do I need to use the letter C to represent COVID?
You can say it's fine.
If we've got some kind of crazy theory as to, I don't know, COVID doesn't affect people because they're in shape, or COVID can be cured by hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin or fucking fermented Brussels sprout juice or whatever the latest one is.
I haven't tried that one yet.
Yeah. Well, don't release this podcast until we patent and release our fermented Brussels sprout juice supplement.
Yes, that makes sense.
My friends on the Conspirituality podcast have got a great saying, and it's listen to what they say, but then watch what they sell, right? I mean, it's instructive that Alex Jones was selling fucking immunity boosting supplements in early 2020. Rogan was busy. What was he selling? Some kind of immune force, alpha brain. Well, there's alpha brain.
Horse dewormer.
Yeah. No, but he's also had some kind of immunity booster. On it did anyway.
Okay.
There's agendas. I mean, Robert Malone, after 20 years of thinking he hasn't gotten the recognition he deserves, now has the recognition he deserves. He's got a talking circuit for life, right? Like, he's making money off this. I would argue that, early in the pandemic, people were accusing me, yeah, sure, you just want everyone to shut down so all they can do is buy jiu-jitsu instructionals. I promise you, that is the single worst strategy that you could take, because you've pissed off everybody who's still training. And the people who are grateful for you speaking up, they don't have a pressing problem. They don't have a problem getting out of side control right now because they're not in the bottom of side control, and they're not going to buy a side control escape thing.
Let me get this straight. All the schools that are shut down, you want them all shut down so they can buy your DVDs at grapplearts.com, because nobody's going to be able to train and use this information. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was a thread of accusation.
Wow. That's far-fetched. Wow.
Yeah, well, it's not the most far-fetched theory that's been floating around the last couple of years, is it now? I mean,
no, you're very true. This is very true.
Yeah, there's QAnon, WooAnon, and others BJJanon, where I'm not a big fan of the cartoonist Scott Adams, the guy who did Dilbert. I think his politics are really kind of fascist. But he did say something that was really good. Somebody asked him about, well, what do you think about Dr. Peter McCullough and Robert Malone on Joe Rogan? And his answer was, there are only two options. Number one, there's a big pharma conspiracy that's so big and so efficient that it blocks out the sun. Or number two, these are two scientists who didn't manage to convince any of their colleagues that they had the right answer, but they've gone on to convince people who can be easily impressed by big scientific sounding words. And I think that looking at it like that, I mean, I'll go to the firefighting for a second. If we're a crew, the three of us are a crew, and we pull up and there's a house that's on fire, and I decide we're going to attack it in the front, but we want the back window broken so we can get some of the smoke out. And I go to the next crew of 3 or 4 people and say, hey, go to the back of the house, break the window on the second story on the back side of the house. It doesn't get much simpler than that, but the odds of that actually successfully happening are probably only 70 or 80%. Something's going to go wrong. There's a dog in the backyard. They're tired and they break the window on the ground floor. They break the window on the left-hand side of the house. The window's made of Lexan and they can't break it. They forgot to bring a stick to break the window. Like that, it doesn't get simpler than that. And I'm only trying to coordinate 7 people in my example, or 6 people in my example. And already the first step of my plan has gone out the window. And anybody who's done any kind of managerial stuff and tried to get like 6
like
or
Aaron.
8.
Yeah.
Really?
Well,
so how,
again, it's like trying to coordinate anything where it's like, okay, guys, we have a plan. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And then you go, okay, break. And then everybody does their own thing.
Was it one of the Prussian generals? No plan of contact survives. No plan of action survives contact with the enemy.
Yeah.
So no super huge conspiracy that relies on hundreds of thousands of people keeping their mouths shut and hundreds of thousands of scientists at universities picking up the red phone at exactly the right time to coordinate the results. I mean, yeah. It's ludicrous. And that 2 things can be true. Big pharma can be corrupt and designed for making money, and millions of people wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for the output of big pharma as kind of monitored by government and public health organizations. Those 2 things can be true at the same time. So,
yeah, I think that's what people don't realize. It's like both of those things you just said are kind of right in their own way. Cause like, hey, there's been cases of, big pharma or like pharmaceutical companies kind of like, hey, there's a lot of money on the line when there's drugs like going to trials and all that, like, especially like publicly traded companies and things like that, where like it can be make or break for a company. If their treatment works, they're set for life. If it doesn't work, then like that's it. We got to close up shop.
Okay. Now let's say we have a drug for hair loss or I don't know, penis pills, right? The 2 most lucrative drugs.
You got Aaron's attention with penis pills, but go on.
And I'm the pharmaceutical. I'm Joe Pharma. I'm running the company that sells these penis pills. And I do a little trial. I do the bare minimum, and I kind of sweep it under the rug, and I like exclude certain people, and I cook the books to make the initial trial show positive effects. Or what? Yeah, kind of the way that was Joe Rogan's uncle scientifically evaluated Alpha Brain, right? It was his company. Mm-hmm. It was a super small trial. There's tons of ways that you can cook the books to have trials give the outcome that you want, and accidentally give you the wrong answer. Because I've done enough experiments to have screwed it up a whole number of ways. But now we're going to say, all right, now we're going to try and sneak this past the CDC in the States, and I'm going to try and sneak it by the Public Health Organization of Mexico. I don't know what it is, and Canada. and Barbados and Cuba and Albania and Germany and France and Switzerland and the UK and Dubai and, I don't know, Liechtenstein. Because every one of these countries that's giving out, where I want to get my penis pills distributed is going to do some kind of monitoring of that. Eventually, the truth will out. And something like the mRNA COVID vaccines, I mean, there's 5 billion doses, 7 billion, billions and billions of doses have been given in hundreds of countries, each one of which is monitoring for side effects, right? And so if there was this massive flood of heart attacks, above baseline heart attacks that happen naturally, we would know. Like, let's say you can bribe Tony Fauci, and let's say you can corrupt the CDC. Well, you'd also need to do it for Canada. You'd also need to do it for Mexico, and you'd also need to do it for all these other countries. And that's not going to happen.
Yeah. And you made a great point. Just like all these vaccines, whether they're good, bad, whatever, they all have to go through strategic testing through their own policymakers before they're even approved for distribution. And that's what it's like. Do you really think they're able to bribe every single one of them? That's what I just don't understand. The whole anti-vax thing was like, okay, I get it. Okay, fine. You don't want to get it. But then stating malicious facts are like, oh, it causes this, it causes that. Don't get it because it's just, you're trying to poison everybody. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Also on top of that, it's like, well, the vaccine does this. It's like, well, which one? There's also like 15 out there currently. So it's like, you have to kind of individualize. Well, Pfizer does this, Moderna does that, AstraZeneca, Sputnik does that. Like, you can't just say, oh, it's the vaccines. Or, well, which one?
Yeah. You can always find a dissenting opinion if you go to a large enough group of people, right? Like, if you go to 100 jiu-jitsu instructors, you will find one who's got some pretty wacky ideas about how to win a match.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and maybe they can make it work even, because jiu-jitsu is so weird, right? Like, maybe, if you went to Eduardo Tellez, okay, the way that you win a match, this is going back 10, 15 years, is you go out and you drop to your knees and you turtle and you let the guy try and take your back, and then you sweep him. Okay, so that's a kind of a minority opinion. I don't think that would be applicable if everybody started out matches that way. That'd be kind of funny to have two guys dropping it, as opposed to two guys pulling guard at the same time, which still allows a gauge. Both guys dropping a turtle. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, that'd be pretty funny.
It would be the death knell of the sport.
There's double guard pulls, but have you ever heard of double turtle pulls?
I did pull turtle once in a tournament I was fighting. I was refereeing. This is back in the day when there was no qualification to referee. So I was refereeing, doing the best I could, hoping to get out of the kids division because the parents were way worse than the kids. And I had the flu. So I was kind of feverish, but I was trying to help out. And my instructor came, hey, we need you in this division, okay, to compete. Okay. So I borrowed a gi. So I'm feverish. I go in for a throw. There's an awesome photo of me looking like I'm about to launch this guy with Tayatoshi into outer space. Totally didn't work. The photo was taken just at the right time. And I just said, oh, fuck it. And I dropped to the turtle. And then I did manage to sweep him from there. And
there you go.
Think finish it maybe with a knee bar. I'm not sure. But so I have pulled turtle, but it's probably not the number one strategy to, you can always find a dissenting opinion, and Eduardo Tellez might have that dissenting opinion, and maybe it even works for him, but it's not going to work for everybody. I think we probably agree on that. And when you get to, thousands and thousands and thousands of virologists and thousands and thousands and thousands of immunologists and epidemiologists, or climate change scientists for that matter, you can always find one guy who's got the minority opinion. And people are always like, well, science is driven forward by the minority opinion. Everyone thought Galileo was wrong. And that's true. But the number of times that the minority opinion is correct in science is real small. So if at any one point in time you had to guess, is the earth flat or is it round like everybody says? The dominant theory certainly is round. There's probably some engineer out there who's like arguing for it being flat. if your money is best bet on the fact that it's round, that the dominant theory is correct. I mean, again, same with jiu-jitsu. If I say, hey, here's a throw that's been working in judo for ages, and I think it's going to work in jiu-jitsu, that's kind of a dominant belief. Whereas if I go, hey, I learned this super cool pressure point takedown in Hapkido, and I'm going to bet that that's the minority opinion. I'm going to suggest that until there's more data, you should go with a majority opinion. You should probably just go with a tried and true judo throw, as opposed to, this one outlandish, crazy opinion by, Joe's Hapkido and grappling club owner.
Is this like the Detroit survival?
Detroit urban survival.
Should I listen to him, or should I listen to, jiu-jitsu black belt, judo black? When it comes to training and self-defense, I'm not sure who to pick here.
I wonder. I understand that people can be crazy, right? I think that guy's kind of nuts. There was somebody on Reddit who claimed to have known him before when he was a bouncer and said he was completely nuts. The Detroit Urban Survival Training guy?
Yes.
The T,
yeah,
the T stands for training.
T for training.
But what I don't understand is the people following. I understand that there's some Chinese guy who thinks he can blast people with his chi. Like, people are crazy. How does he find the people to go flying across the room when they get hit by this magic chi ball? McDojo Life had this awesome thing of where it was two guys, the master, he had this ball of chi, and his student was beside him, and the master throws the ball of chi at the wall. It bounces off the wall and hits the student, and the student goes flying back. So it's not only the direct blast, it's the ricochet blast. How do you find these people who just believe something that crazy? So how does that Detroit urban survival tactics or training guy find people who are willing to train there, especially when he's being pilloried in kind of the normal martial arts press? But I guess, he's too deadly. He's being, the media is trying to shut him down.
The media is trying to shut him down. His hands are registered weapons. Didn't you know that?
Yeah.
Well, it's just self-defense.
He killed a man in Reno just to watch him die.
Yeah, no, it's quite interesting, but in a sense too, it's almost I guess you have to be whatever. It's dangerous, right? Because somebody who doesn't know any better and they go to try that, it can be dangerous if they decide to do that. If they decide that this is actual fact and not test out that theory before it actually happens, right? Or maybe that's the only gun survival tactic that they know, and this happens, and that's what they try. So I don't know. I find it dangerous. If it's a joke, it's a joke, but he takes it very, very seriously, though. That's my only worry with him.
I guess if I go back to my early days of training Kung Fu, I had my doubts that what we were learning would work. I had my doubts that doing all these forms or kata over and over and over would then magically translate into amazing timing, distance, and range in an actual fight. But I still continued training for years. I don't know if it's going to work, but this guy says it's going to work, so I should probably continue doing it. And the reality is, as soon as you spar, all that stuff goes out the window. Yeah. All of it. Except, it was funny. You'd have this exchange, which looked really just like bad kickboxing. And then the two people would separate, because we did do full contact sparring once or twice a year. And I got more out of those full contact sparring sessions once or twice a year than I did out of the remaining 363 days of training the rest of the year. But you'd have these two guys that kind of be beating each other up with bad kickboxing, and then they'd go back and they'd take a stance kind of from one of the katas, and then they'd go back and it would look more like bad kickboxing, or soon it would devolve into just guys throwing giant right overhand haymakers. Because under pressure, no plan of action survives contact with the enemy. And if you've never trained your stuff under pressure, it's even less of it will survive.
Mm-hmm. So kind of like kind of going more into like your kind of history, because I would say at the beginning, like you were really involved in social media and obviously getting your instructionals out very early, especially as kind of like jiu-jitsu is kind of getting into that YouTube phase as it is more instructional, like different platform phase. Like, how did that kind of all evolve? Was it just something where like, wait, how am I going to expand my business? What was it?
Yeah, I think at that point I was trying to decide whether I should try to open a school or not open a school. And the alternative to not, obviously if I opened a school, then that would be a business and that would be a way that I could get training in as well. I was also a firefighter though, and that made the scheduling of that difficult. Like there would have been some logistical hurdles because we don't work on a 7-day schedule. We work on an 8-day schedule. So there are ways to do it. There's lots of firefighters who are involved in teaching, but then you need another person or a bunch of other people. And it seemed, so at the time, it was like, okay, I don't know if I'll figure this out in the future, but for now, I think I'll just do instructionals and focus on my own training. So I wasn't the first guy to produce jiu-jitsu instructionals. Obviously, I think that was actually the honor for that goes to Hoyce and Horian when they were like, God, $350 for something like 10 techniques shown in slow motion from different angles and
on VHS.
Half-hour VHS.
The big like VHS like box like this.
Yeah. But then you start seeing independent productions like Michael Jen. I don't know if anybody listening or watching remembers Michael Jen, but I think he was, excuse me. I think he was just a brown belt when he started producing that. And he hadn't won any world championships, but what he was showing was logical. It was, I thought, better laid out and better paced than what the Gracies were releasing at the time. And he was just kind of like, well, I don't have the credentials of the Gracie family, but I'm just going to show more stuff. I was like, I can do that. So the very first instructional I ever produced was just, we had one of those VHS cameras where you'd clip the giant VHS cassette to the side of the camera. So you start out with a giant camera and made it even more giant by adding a VHS cassette, and you'd film directly onto the VHS cassette. A friend of mine had one, and I'd just been thinking about some ways to attack the turtle. And my idea was, if you have somebody in turtle, you can attack above the arm, below the arm, or in front of the leg. Basically, you can invade different parts of his turtle structure, and you can invade those spaces with your arm or your leg, right? You can take your knee and you can jam it, say, in between his elbow and his knee, or you can jam it under his armpit, or you can jam it in from above. And these lead to different things. And that was kind of an interesting conceptual approach. So we filmed it on a VHS cassette with no intention of ever selling it. And I never did. I wish I could find it. That'd be super cool. We filmed it in the rec room of his apartment building, and I made some copies and I sent it out to a few friends, and they were like, this is pretty good. Like, you might want to clean this up and sell it. And I'm like, why? How can I sell this? Like, who's ever heard of me? Who's ever heard of Michael Jen? Was the answer. It's like, okay, good point. So that was the start of it. I would give a fair bit of money for getting my hands on that original VHS tape. It's kind of funny. So yeah, I think it was just having knowledge. But I mean, there's two things. There's having knowledge, and there's having some kind of pedagogy or teaching method or way to convey it. And when you take a look at those early, Panther productions, they'd have,
I remember the hosted Panther productions. 60% of the time, it works every time.
Exactly. Or they'd have, they'd get a fighter, Don Fry, and then they'd make like a 12 or 18 volume thing. Don Fry teaches takedown. Okay, Don Fry had decent takedowns. Don Fry teaches devastating striking combinations. Okay, Don Fry had very good striking. Don Fry teaches submissions from the guard. Don Fry didn't know what the difference between guard and turtle was. And I remember him going for an arm bar on the wrong arm. He could have converted it to an omoplata if he'd known what he was doing, but he had no idea what he's doing. Next thing you know, there's like Panther Productions, Don Fry's submissions from the guard. Don't get me wrong. Don Fry is an amazing fighter, one tough dude, highly entertaining. My voice is breaking there. It's second puberty. That's awesome. But yeah, the production values were pretty low, and also the pedagogy, the approach to trying to teach it was pretty low. And I thought, yeah, I can probably improve on that. Mm-hmm. And I think I did. So as were other people, because there were other people who had the same idea.
Nice. So what's some advice you would give to somebody who's looking to, like, hey, you know, I want to teach online. I want to have kind of like what you did, and you've been doing it a long time. Like, hey, like I want to have like this DVD or that, or put together a course. So from your years of experience doing this, like what's some advice you would give them? Some things that worked out well for you, and maybe some things that maybe not so much.
Well, yeah, there's a whole lot of things that didn't work out. So it's, you know, what is it? Edison having not failed to invent the light bulb 1,000 times, but having found 999.
One way to make it work.
Yeah, exactly.
One way to make it work.
I think the obvious thing to start with is YouTube, right? You can judge whether or not your approach, because let's say that I'm super high energy, right? Let's just say I'm jumping all over the place. I'm like an infomercial fitness product maker. It looks like I'm high on coke and methamphetamine all the time. And this is how I teach. This is just normally how I am. Is there a market for this? Well, there's an easy way to tell. Put it on YouTube. Start teaching on YouTube. Put 50 videos on YouTube of you teaching, right? So a student asks you a question. Hey, Biff, what do I do when the guy goes to S mount and tries to go for the armbar? You probably had an answer for your student. So that's your first video that you put on YouTube. Mm-hmm. The next day, hey, Master Biff, when I'm in half guard and the guy gets a knee shield on me, I don't know what to do. What to do when you're in half guard and the guy gets knee shield on you. There, that's the title. You might be able to polish that a little bit, and then put it. Maybe your style resonates with people, maybe it doesn't. So before you go invest a whole ton of time on fancy camera equipment, audio equipment, lighting equipment, or cut a deal with some producer, see if the way that you're doing it resonates, and you'll get feedback. Oh, this video did really well. Why? I included some humor in it. Okay, well, maybe you should include more humor. So I think that's probably the easiest way to get to test the waters. And, you know, if you do then go ahead, then you'll have some kind of following that you can use to promote it. It's a mistake. One of the big mistakes is just, I'm going to produce it and they'll come to me because I'm going to produce a wrist lock video. And my wrist locks are so good, and I know they're good. All my students know they're good. People are just going to come knocking my doors down to get my wrist lock DVD or my wrist lock app or my wrist lock streaming instructional. No, if they don't know who you are, they're not going to do it. So I think, unfortunately, you got to be willing to play the social media game.
Yeah, you said a big thing where we've talked to a bunch of other guys that are involved in social media, and it's like eyeballs. Eyeballs are everything. So it's getting as much free content out there as possible, and then seeing what the audience kind of does, refining your process, and then going from there, really. But that's kind of it's one thing we always keep hearing. It's just like eyeballs, eyeballs, eyeballs. Yeah.
It's difficult in some ways because, you know, eyeballs by them, like if I wanted to get maximum number of eyeballs on my jiu-jitsu site, the answer is easy. Get 3 super hot chicks in bikinis and have that. This was done about 10 years ago. There was a channel that was like a couple of really well-endowed girls going around and taking jiu-jitsu lessons from the various luminaries in Southern California.
Interesting.
I think I remember that channel. I mean, unfortunately, I think you and Aaron may not be able to pull this off, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, a very niche audience, perhaps. Seeing as we've all got facial hair. But the trouble is, so that gets a lot of eyeballs. If they then produced their instructional, would anyone buy it? The answer is no. I mean, again, they might be able to monetize OnlyFans, which... This was in the era before OnlyFans. So just eyeballs by itself. I mean, that Detroit urban survival guy also gets a lot of eyeballs.
That's eyeballs. Yeah, you know, you make a good point.
So it's yes, eyeballs, and quality and something congruent with what you're trying to sell, which actually means I'm an idiot. Because if you take a look at my Instagram posts, say, I released something, I want to say 4 or 5 days ago, about how it was ironic that people who thought that you can't trust Big Pharma about the vaccines, as soon as they get sick with COVID, they're running to get Big Pharma products like ivermectin, beep, hydroxychloroquine, beep, beep, and monoclonal antibodies, and prednisone, all of which are produced by Big Pharma. So, and that blew up, right? Like there's hundreds and hundreds of comments, thousands of likes. And then the next day I go and release something about the omoplata. And that's got, a couple hundred likes. It's the controversy gets eyeballs, but really it just pisses a bunch of people off as well. And that's because then you get angry comments.
And then buy my omoplata DVD coming soon.
Yeah. So the algorithm rewards controversy. It's part of the reason why I think you see people who might have been more moderate initially, they get so much positive feedback from the universe. When they go a little bit controversial, they start, talking about shooting down surveillance drones that are out there to make sure that they're not breaking quarantine. Like I saw that post. How many surveillance drones were used in North America to ensure that people weren't breaking lockdown? I'm going to go 0.
Yeah. So
it's like taking a super brave patriot stance against a non-existent threat. Again, tons of controversy. The guy goes, hey, I'm getting so many people agree with me here. I'm just going to go more and more and more in that direction. It's the radicalization method. You've seen it happen in real time.
No, it's true. Because like even the biggest one I always heard was like, oh, they're injecting 5G or whatever microchips in the vaccine, and that's what they're gonna. I'm like, motherfucker, they're tracking you with your phone.
Yeah.
They're doing that.
Well, there was the big thing in the beginning. It was like, oh, you see all these 5G towers going up. That's what's creating COVID. But then like that whole conspiracy like disappeared like 2 weeks later, and it went on to something. I'm like, whoa, what? Like that just didn't happen, guys? Like. I don't know, since we're on this topic, like what's the craziest thing you've seen on social media, I guess in the last 2 years with all this happening, where you're just like, where the hell is this coming from? Because that was the one for me. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not accurate.
It's a super nerdy thing, but there was a paper that was published in some pay-to-play journal, right? So in the big journals, Nature, Science, I don't know, British Medical Journal, New England Journal of Medicine, those places, I can't go and pay you to publish my article. I might have to pay it once you accept my article. I might have to pay a fee for processing, but it's not like I can go, hey, here's a couple of grand, publish this. There are such journals. So in one such journal, there was an article talking about how 5G radiation set up harmonic resonances, which sounds very scientific, in the phospholipid cell membrane, which again, I mean, there is a phospholipid cell membrane, but they're just using all the big words, and set up pentagonal holes in the cell membrane. And then RNA could go through those holes and spontaneously assemble into the viral genome, which is like 20,000 RNA units long in a very specific order. And that's why we were getting worldwide coronavirus. It wasn't just that people were getting sick from 5G. 5G was actually assembling the viral genome inside people's bodies all over the world. And it was a super well laid out thing. I mean, but it couldn't have been, you couldn't have had a more farcical article. It's like taking.
Now, can you sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but now can you say what you exactly just said in an Alex Jones voice? Ladies and gentlemen,
yeah. I have limits, and you found them. That
Black Hawk helicopters.
Yeah, the people talk about the media, right? And when people start talking about the media, what they really mean is the center and center left media. right? Let's assume the New York Times is center left. I don't think it's that left, but let's grant you that. And on the opposite side, we've got Fox News, and beyond Fox News, we've got the Dan Bonginos, the Alex Joneses. The Joe Rogan is kind of neck and neck with Fox News sometimes. Mm-hmm. That's part of media too, and they've got all the same incentives. There's monetization, but when I follow a story that the New York Times reports on and I take it to the science, it's like, okay, they usually, like 99% of the time, it's like, okay, they kind of got that right. Again, the facts, not the policy. When The Guardian in the UK publishes a story, it's like usually their underlying data is correct. When Fox fucking News publishes something, or Tucker, the human shit stain Carlson, starts talking about something, it's like it's almost always a complete absolute distortion of the actual facts at the time. Like it's unbelievable. There is none of this. Everyone's lying to you because again, I think it was a conspirituality thing. If everything is true, if everything is possible, then nothing is true. If it's totally possible that the New York Times is lying to you the same way that Fox News is lying to you, then who knows? Anything could be possible. Nothing's true. How are we even to know? And I think that's just not true. There are, I'm not saying New York Times or The Guardian, those are the two biggest sources of traditional media that I consume. I'm not saying they've ever gotten it right every time, but statistically, they tend not to be making shit up, at least with the reporting stuff. And that's just not true on the other side. And so you've got a whole bunch of people living with fantasy data. You've got, Tucker Carlson, whose big defense when he got taken to court was, hey, I'm an entertainer. I'm not a news reporter. I shouldn't be expected to be held to that standard of actually telling the truth.
I remember this. This is the most ridiculous thing ever. It's like, wait a minute. Aren't you a reporter? Nah, man, I just entertain people. I'm just effing around here.
Yeah, I'm about as factual as Saturday Night Live. But the difference is millions of people listen to me. Like, what is it? With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Or wasn't it a Key and Peele sketch? With great power come these balls on your chin. But, with great power comes great responsibility. And I'm going to like it's for one, the facts that are coming across are completely irresponsible. And secondly, it's just underlying, it's creating this narrative of everyone is lying to you. Right. And that's super dangerous. It's just creating this massive conspiracism, this conspiratorial worldview. And I know that the Freedom Bros love to cite, the Nuremberg codes and imply that, having to show your vaccination status before you get on a plane is exactly the same as what the Jews went through in Kristallnacht or in the Warsaw Ghetto. But I will say there is, and I'll go to the World War II analogies or the pre-World War II analogies, this incredibly wide-reaching conspiracies everywhere, right? There's Jewish communists around every corner. That is a precursor or sort of an on-ramp to fascism. That is true. Like if you get enough people believing enough impossible things before breakfast, you can get them to do anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's so hard to kind of, and again, you get people who are just like, they just don't want to believe anything anymore, right? Because they're getting all these different things and they're like, whatever, I don't care anymore. And again, they just, okay, I'll take it with a grain of salt, and then they just try to do their own thing, I guess, at that point.
It's totally understandable why people would go there. But the danger then is you end up with apathy and inaction, right? Like right now, I think the Ontario hospital system isn't doing that well. Am I correct?
It's not doing great right now. Yeah. They're kind of all over the place because obviously, like, ICU capacity is starting to rise. Obviously, more hospitalizations are starting to happen. And it's unfortunate because everybody, the vaccinated are blaming the anti-vaxxers, anti-vaxxers are blaming the vaccinated. So it's just like all over the place right now.
Yeah. I think objectively, we're going to get just between the nurses and doctors being sick. Let's say that Omicron is 1/3 as deadly as Delta. I think that seems to be roughly the right ballpark, which totally ignores the possibility of totally doesn't talk about long COVID, but that's a whole nother rant for another day. Let's say it is 1/3 less deadly. What happens when you have 15 or 20 times as many cases, right? Then that's 3 or 4 times as many people. Sorry. No, that's 5. That's 5 times as many people in the hospital.
Yeah.
And with less people able to take care of them. And I mean, I do know this from kind of working in a healthcare adjacent field. When they say like this whole ICU business, like an ICU, great, we can create an ICU bed, right? We could create an ICU bed in my spare bedroom here. We could designate this as an ICU bed. What makes it an ICU bed are nurses and medicines, right? Like they're running out of monoclonal antibodies. I was hearing one Ontario physician yesterday say he had like 300 doses of one of the monoclonal antibodies for the whole province. Hopefully there's more coming, but you know what? I think Florida and Texas are going to need them too. And also it very generally in an ICU, it's 1 nurse to 1 patient, right? Some patients need 2 nurses. Sometimes 1 nurse can take care of 2 patients. What happens when you got 1 nurse taking care of 3 patients? And that nurse was pushing paper for the last 5 years. And like, well, no, we need you in the ward. I don't have ICU training. I don't have critical care training. Doesn't matter. We just need a body. So you're just throwing bodies in there who are not trained, who are running out of the treatment options, trying to take care of 3 times as many people as they would ordinarily need to take care of. That's the price of inaction, right? Like, what's the single best way to stay out of the ICU right now, or to stay out of the hospital right now? It's to get your booster. Is it going to last forever? No. Is it? But I'm going to get Omicron. I am. There's no way around it. I vote for getting it in March.
I probably had it already. I just thought at the time, because like I've had every shot given to me imaginable at this point, so I just thought I had a really bad cold for a few days, shook it off. But you know what? I may not have been so lucky if I was given other situations. So
yeah, but I'll just, given the choice, I would far rather catch it in March or April when the hospital system isn't teetering on the edge of collapse. Like good luck getting an ambulance to the hospital now on a timely manner. Like there's tremendous delays even for heart attack and stroke right now, at least in British Columbia. And I thought I saw the same thing in a bunch of Ontario cities.
Well, that's the issue. That's
more
the
than
issue
likely.
now.
Yeah. I think what the issue is there's only so many resources to go around. And as you know, being a firefighter and a first responder, like there's only so many resources to go around. There's only so many hospital beds. There's only so many, you can be like, oh, let's just double the ICU capacity and build a bunch of beds. It's like, well, it's great, but like, who's going to build them, or who's going to manage them?
Yeah. So, but the trouble is, like, honestly, like the best way to stay out of the hospital for January and February is to get your booster. That's really rock solid. Like that's the data there is unequivocal. It doesn't mean that every single person who got their booster is going to stay out of the hospital, but it's just everybody wearing a seatbelt is not going to survive a car accident. But it, I don't know, triples the chances of survival. It's more than triples the chances of staying out of the hospital. But people are so confused. Fuck, this guy's saying this thing. I heard this on Rogan. Yeah, fuck, I'm just not going to do nothing at all.
Yeah.
And so my point is apathy and inaction have their own consequences. It's like I used to do a lot of whitewater kayaking. So there's these 2 terms. There's panic and reverse panic. So panic is when you're just using something's gone terribly wrong. Your boat is flipped and you're going down towards the brink of the waterfall, and then below there is a deadly canyon. And if you go over that waterfall, you're probably dead. Panic is swimming, just like all action, no mind, right? You're just thrashing as hard as you can. Maybe you're swimming to the wrong side of the river, but you're still swimming like crazy, right? So you should actually be trying to figure out what the best thing to do is and then applying your energy there. So panic by itself is bad. Same in a jiu-jitsu context, right? If you have me mounted and you're smothering me, panicking is the wrong thing to do. I shouldn't just like bench press and bridge, unless I'm doing that in a really specific way. But yeah, I shouldn't do the beginner mistake. That's panicking. Otherwise, I'm going to get caught in like the old swinging armbar, and that's pretty embarrassing. But similarly, the opposite of that is reverse panic, where people are just so overwhelmed, they're like, oh, fuck it, I give up.
Yeah.
And where they kind of go limp and they just accept the fate. I've had friends, I wasn't there when he died, but a friend of mine got washed into a really deadly canyon in flood after wiping out a set of rapids up above. So this wasn't an entirely theoretical thing. And people who watched it said he was just like hanging onto his boat and looking downstream, and he knew what was downstream. So that's reverse panic. It's just like overwhelming. So no action and just being so overwhelmed with thought. There's probably examples in jiu-jitsu as well, where people are like, oh, fuck, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to try and like, protect here and not do anything at all. No, you should be, the middle ground is keep thinking and keep doing stuff. So there is a cost to inaction.
Definitely is. So I guess since we're on this subject, what would you like to see, like, BC government? And I know you talk about, since you live in BC, like, I guess what is a long-term solution to COVID? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm a brown belt, pulling on lapels and stuff, but like, I think it's going to be something that's going to be here for the foreseeable future.
I don't think we're
going to
getting
be other things getting thrown at us. Omicron, Megatron, C3PO, R2D2, CBD from Spirit Leaf, water down. It's all coming to us. So what's like a long-term solution that you see that can can save as many lives as possible, but maybe doesn't shut down the world, I guess.
I'll just go back to the point that we didn't really shut down the world. Like, there were countries that did shut down the world, and all the freedom bros, you don't live in a country, well, unless you live in like Spain. I think Spain did a pretty thorough, and Italy maybe. But if you're living in the States or in Canada, they didn't shut down the world. Like, no. But that's a separate rant. I don't know. The answer is, and anyone who says that they know for sure is full of shit. I think there's some hopeful signs. Even right now, if I was running a gym in British Columbia or in Ontario, I would be strongly tempted to ignore the government regulations, but I wouldn't just open up and business as normal. There's a false dichotomy, like open or closed. No. You can do things like training pods. You can do things like improving ventilation. You can do things like having much smaller classes. Hey guys, for the next 3 weeks, or you can do things like temporary shutdowns. Like, we're just going to wait till the cases come down to less than 1,000 a day, right? There are intermediate options. Until cases come down to less than 1,000 a day, we're going to open up the gym for, I'm making this up, depends how big your space is, for partner training. You and a partner can come in and you can book your 1 hour slot and train. You still get some training. I'll be there coaching you, but we're just not going to do it exactly the way that we did, right? They're not open or closed. And honestly, if I ran a club right now, which I don't, I'd be tempted to go with some kind of intermediate thing. So where I'm trying to be responsible. Personally, I would have a vaccination policy in my club. I think there are clubs that have that. It does take some work to find them. I think it's a couple of things. It reduces the transmission, doesn't bring it to zero. It reduces the severity of it reduces transmission by a couple of mechanisms. Doesn't bring it to zero. It also tends to imply that those people are probably not out at the underground club partying till 4 a.m. with 500 of their best friends while drunk out of their mind. If they're fully vaccinated, they're probably more likely to be taking some kind of precaution in their lives. So that's sort of would be my short-term answer. Medium term, I think a big thing that we don't know the answer yet to is how much immunity does something like Omicron convey against other variants. Omicron's going to come. We don't know if it's going to stick around. It might burn out. It might poof, like the candle that burns 6 times as bright burns 6 times as short. Mm-hmm. It might come and be gone. It might come and stick around. It might become the dominant thing. We don't know. At this point, it looks like it's going to come and burn out, and I can only hope. What then? How much immunity does Omicron give you against Delta? Because Delta is going to come back, right? If Omicron gives you 95% immunity against Delta, that's fantastic. If it's 10% immunity against Delta, that's a very different world. Mm-hmm. I think eventually there will be, it will become endemic. Endemic doesn't mean mild though. Endemic just means found everywhere and not likely to go away. So then how do we adapt? Honestly, I still think the answer is vaccination. There are universal coronavirus vaccines coming where they try to, because coronavirus is a family of viruses. I don't know if I'm mansplaining this, but it includes like half the varieties of the flu. It includes MERS. It includes SARS-1. It includes a whole bunch of viruses, which we've dealt with, which we're dealing with, and which are going to come in the future. And if we can come up with a universal coronavirus vaccine, which is under development, will it pan out? We don't know. That would be a huge game changer. So best case scenario, Omicron basically immunizes everybody who hasn't been immunized. It's very effective against the other variants and buys us enough time to get to a universal coronavirus vaccine. That's my best case scenario. If that pans out, things will be pretty normal in a couple of months, right? I think our hospital systems are almost certainly going to get hammered. And by hammered, I mean like doing triage in the hallways and okay, if you're over 50, sorry, you're not getting treated. Initially be if you're over 70, we're not treating you because it'll take 3 people to treat you, and we could treat 3 people under 50, and that age will start coming down, and the number of comorbidities that you have to disqualify you will start coming down, and I think it'll be really ugly. I think January and February are going to be grim. Don't break a leg. Like don't break a leg skiing. Don't break an arm in jiu-jitsu for the next couple of months because there may not be an ambulance to take you to the hospital. Yeah, then I think it gets better.
That's the biggest worry too, because it's just like all the other stuff doesn't go away, right? Your heart attacks, all your other treatments, all the surgeries, injuries, like that's the worry. So I hope, again, like everybody, I hope they're the best, but obviously prepare for the worst. I think at that point.
I think the other thing, and Canada's remiss in this, is that, I mean, what I was doing for the last couple of months, and what I'm going to start doing again as soon as this wave dies down, is I was doing a lot of one-on-one training. And we would, if, I don't know, my friend Alex and I were going to train. Okay, we're going to train Monday and Tuesday. Great. We'll both do a rapid test on Monday. Right? I've got a box of rapid tests. They're way too expensive now. That's like, that adds up quick because they're about $14-15 a test. And, you get 25 in a box, and that's $350 if I recall correctly. I'm not doing this math on the fly. Cheap. I'm not a mathematologist. But I would have thought that the rapid tests would be universally available, essentially for free, the way they are in the UK. And that, let's just say that they were 50 cents each. All right, that's a pretty easy solution. Like, it's a pain in the ass to go to jiu-jitsu class 10 minutes early and swab the inside of your mouth and your nose and get a test. But hey, if it allows us to train, that's actually not that big an imposition. And that's actually not, that's not a hardship, right? Like, again, there'd be like, this is just like having to storm the German trenches in World War I. No.
This violates the Charter of Rights.
Yeah. No, it's you trying to take care of yourself. It's you trying to take care of your training partners. And it's you trying to take care of the people that you don't know. The little old lady at the fucking grocery store. You know, you might be young and healthy. All your training partners might be young and healthy. What about the giving it to the grocery store clerk who then gives it to her grandma, and your grandma can't go to the hospital because you already gave it to 3 other people? Like, it's there's this idea of, oh, you got me going now. This idea of rights without responsibility.
You know what really grinds Stephen's gears?
This idea of rights without responsibilities. How many of our jiu-jitsu brethren would have described themselves as warriors, or would describe themselves as warriors? I'm a warrior, bro. Okay, cool. So like pick an era. Like let's go to, I don't know, 16th century Africa, and you're a warrior in some Ugandan village. And I don't know anything about Ugandan villages in 16th century Africa. I'm going to assume they had little villages. I'm going to assume there were warriors in them. Does being a warrior mean walking around doing whatever the fuck you want? Or does it mean having a role within that society to take care of other people? Oh, look, here come the guys from the next village. My freedom tells me I can just go away and I'm leaving. No, you got a responsibility to take care of the people in that village. Being a warrior doesn't mean doing whatever the hell you want. It means using your skills to some extent to help protect society and a bunch of other stuff. So there's this basic, like, a moral precept that I have a right to swing my fist, but that right to swing my fist stops where your nose begins. I can do whatever the hell I want, but as soon as I start intruding on your freedom, that's a problem. So I believe generally in gun ownership. I have guns. I have a right to go shoot those guns under controlled circumstances. I don't have the right to set up a shooting range in the park across the street and plink away at targets there. Because if I screw up, I'm going to hit the mom who's picnicking with her kids. Mm. Right? I have freedom, but that's constrained by the rights of other people to not have my freedom to infringe upon them. If you live in Alaska or you live in Nunavut and you're 300 kilometers from anybody else, shoot your gun anytime you want. Do whatever the hell you want. You're basically not affecting other people. Mm-hmm. But if you're choosing to live in society where we've got supermarkets run by, where we have Walmarts, where the Walmart greeters are all 70 years old, people who don't have a pension, and poor people who probably don't have the best health. We have Walmarts, we have pharmacies, we have gas stations, we have libraries, we have movie theaters, we have all these amenities because we choose to live in a society. So you have some rights, but you also have responsibility to take care of other people. So if there's a 10% chance that wearing an N95 mask or a KN95 mask is going to stop somebody else from getting sick, and I'm going to argue it's a lot higher than 10%, why the hell wouldn't you? Like, mm-hmm. Your right to have a free face trumps somebody else's right to live. I'd say that the ethics on that are completely wrong.
No, and you talked about it. It's just about social responsibility, right? It's just being responsible to your neighbor and is not infringing upon your rights. But it's being a responsible human being, plain and simple.
Yeah. So you've said in 10 or 15 seconds what took me 10 minutes of ranting to convey.
That's okay. I'm enjoying the ranting. Definitely. It's a huge honor for me to have you on today. Just closing remarks, like anything. Do you have any sponsors you want to shout out? Anything like that?
If people want to find out more about me, they can search on any platform they want and they'll hopefully find me. If they don't, and I'm not doing my job. So that's about as much of a shout out as I want to do. I think that better times are coming. I think hopefully this is the last big storm. We'll see. We don't know. Like, as my kid said to me, facts don't care about your feelings, Dad. And there are many things I wish were true. and unfortunately not all of them are, right? Like, but I think that there's good evidence to suggest that better times are coming, and they might be coming fairly soon. Hopefully we'll have a conversation 6 months from now, and we can just talk jiu-jitsu, and we'll spend 5 minutes going, man, was that ever a shitty couple of years? Like, how are your chokes coming? What chokes are you working on now? And nothing would make me happier. Like, nothing would make me happier than probably not gonna be ivermectin, not gonna be hydroxychloroquine, but our fermented Brussels sprout juice just being the absolute bomb, and all of a sudden, this whole thing seems like a bad dream. That nothing would make me happier.
No, I like that. Stephan, it's been an awesome pleasure having you on the podcast. I do appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Us. All right. To go back to my Kung Fu days.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
guys.